Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Research Aromatica webinar. We're excited to present a new topic for the month of September. We're going to focus on cannabis and some of the various aspects of this very popular product and plant that has been growing for the last few years. Did want to just first say that on the Aromatic Plant Research Center side, we've been working in cannabis products for about 2 years now, and we got introduced to that as our clients and many of the people in the industry have found a growing interest as it's become very popular for a variety of reasons over the last few years. And with our unique background in aromatic plants and essential oils and other extracts, we were really encouraged by a lot of people to pursue it and look into it. And as we've been able to do that, we've been able to help local farmers in our home office in Utah as they look at ways that they can potentially benefit from growing cannabis products, and as we helped them to be able to look at ways that they can improve their processes as a farming community, but also just education in general in the cannabis industry. Where it was a Schedule I drug for so many years in the United States, there just wasn't a lot of research that was allowed to be done. So many misconceptions about what it is and what it does, and all the vast varieties of options that you have for cannabis products. And so we're excited to be able to dig in from a scientific side and really a practical side and be able to dispel some of those myths and just breed understanding and education, which I think really just brings a lot of respect for this growing industry. And we hope to continue to be a big part of that in everything that we are doing. So I'm very excited for our primary speaker today. We've got a few members of the APRC team, but also we've got Nate Farnsworth, who is with Factory6. As way of introduction, Nate is a person who never really grew up. Rather, he was raised in the deserts of New Mexico. From an early age, Nate understood that the value of hard work and its role in the entrepreneurship as he became a manager of a locally owned pizzeria, and as soon as he got his driver's license and could drive himself to work every day. Also, as an active man, he worked full-time while earning his way through his bachelor's and his master's of business administration. He has spent the last 20 years in the nutrition and supplement industry, playing a key role within account management and business development for several $10-million companies. He lives in Utah and has 3 children, Alice, Scarlett, and Atticus. Nate is president of Factory6, where he works together with his team to create innovative CBD products. Now, before we turn things over to Nate to hear about his interest and all of his interesting things that he is doing, I'd like to turn some time over to Dr. Anjanette DiCarlo and Jillian Thayer, who have a great deal of work and experience in the cannabis industry. Jillian, Dr. DiCarlo, welcome.
Great. Happy to be here today. Cannabis is such an amazing plant. I mean, what an amazing medicinal and aromatic plant. Human beings have been cultivating and using this plant for over 10,000 years. And for me, getting to work on frankincense and also getting to work on cannabis, these 2 amazing species of plants, I feel very blessed because they really have such a long human history. Hemp has been grown for food, fiber, and medicine. And in my lifetime, I have seen the pendulum swing from strict just say no campaigns that came with a lot of incarceration, disproportionately affecting people of color, to now we're seeing 33 states in the United States that have legalized it for medicinal use, and 11 of those, including the District of Columbia, also legalizing adult use. Now, this trend extends internationally. Our neighbors to the north, Canada, have federally legalized cannabis as a plant across the board. In 2018, here in the United States, the US Farm Bill legalized the growing of hemp. And this was really a turning point moment. The growing of hemp is a cultivar of cannabis sativa. And hemp is not psychoactive. You can't get high from hemp. Instead, Hemp is grown for food, fiber, and medicine. Today, we're going to focus primarily on the growing of hemp for CBD, for the extraction of CBD. So that's the medical use of hemp. Let me start the slides here. Oops. There we go. All right, take a look at this, everybody. Here's the US CBD market size and forecast for 2019 to 2025. Hemp grown for CBD is definitely a cash crop. It went from being unheard of to a thriving market in a very short period of time. Many family farms see it as a way to bring in much needed revenue to save their farms and to get out of debt. So you see here on the graph in 2019, retail sales were estimated at $4.2 billion. In a COVID affected marketplace in 2020, that went up to $4.7 billion. But over the next 5 years, the CBD market is estimated to hit $16.8 billion. One of the holdups in the market right now is a federal ruling by the FDA on CBD as a dietary supplement. Right now, that's happening on a state-by-state basis. And once we see this ruling, this could really open up the market even more. What happened in 2019 as well, being the first year that it was really grown across the country, was that a lot of family farms went bust. And at the same time, other farms really dominated the market, and a lot of them were completely vertically integrated. It's also expected in a new market that you would see these shifts of people coming in, not making it, getting out. So very briefly, just to give some context, here's an industrial monoculture of hemp. Now, let's be really clear about this as a group, that growing hemp is not automatically sustainable. And some folks just kind of get that image in their mind that it's hemp, it's sustainable. Well, that's not the case. As with any large-scale monoculture comes high energy and high water costs. They can also, like a lot of industrial monoculture, destroy and erode topsoil, which is the base of terrestrial life. So our soil and soil health is so critical that large-scale monoculture for hemp production can be as damaging as any other crop can potentially be when it's grown in this fashion. And so what we really want to see is a thriving market where hemp is grown agroecologically. So here's a picture from a farm. This is CBD duck. These are my neighbors at the show farm right next to my house here. I'm very lucky to have them as neighbors. And they're participating in farming hemp as a regenerative crop. Hemp, when it's grown agroecologically, can be a big benefit to the farm system. It can contribute to soil regeneration and restoration of already depleted soils. It increases overall prosperity for the farm and quality while reducing inputs. And you can see here it's being grown in a permaculture orchard, and it's interspersed with other plants in the system. Last but not least, I just want to note that we're focusing today on CBD, but hemp can be grown for industrial uses, such as biodegradable plastics instead of non-biodegradable plastics derived from petrochemicals that are choking our oceans and rivers. Some of the other products are textiles, and I'm wearing you can't see them, but I'm wearing my hemp cotton blend, organic cotton blend pants for today's talk. But it can also be pressed into boards, which takes pressure off of trees and forests. Also hempcrete insulation, which is an amazing product, and it's completely non-toxic. The bottom line is this is a very versatile plant, and I'm really glad that it's coming back normalized into our lives in a way that we can utilize it for the economic and environmental challenges we face in 2020. So with that said, I want to turn it over to Jillian Thayer. She is a St. Michael's alumni for the St. Michael's students who are in the audience today. And she's also a former medical dispensary supervisor. She supervised a medical dispensary here in Vermont for several years. And now she is APRC's cannabis researcher. So Jill, take it away.
Thanks, Dr. DeCarlo. So I'll be discussing the endocannabinoid system, or really the endogenous cannabinoid system. Endogenous just refers to originating from within an organism. And so the discovery of the endocannabinoid system occurred as a result of researchers studying cannabis to figure out how it exerted its psychoactive effects. They were looking to find the compound within cannabis that induced intoxication. So in 1964, Dr. Mechaloum and colleagues, they were able to identify THC as the active compound within cannabis, but they still weren't aware of THC's mechanism of action. So this prompted further research, which came about in the late 1980s and throughout the 1990s. Scientists discovered two receptors that THC acted on and stimulated, as well as led to the discovery of the endogenous compounds that work on these receptors. In the words of Dr. Mechaloum, receptors are not present in the body because there's a plant out there. They are there in order to be activated by something our body produces when and where needed. And so this research has led to the understanding of our receptors and endocannabinoids. The CB1 receptor is highly concentrated within the brain. The CB2 receptor is found primarily within the periphery, such as organs, connective tissues, glands, and immune cells. So these receptors exist on a cellular level. As we can tell by this image on the screen, we see that they're very, very small molecules. And so I'll discuss further how that actually works. So the endocannabinoids that are best studied that we know of very, very well are anandamide as well as 2-AG. And anandamide gets its name from the Sanskrit word supreme joy or bliss. Anandamide is a wonderful molecule of ours. And so in order to understand how cannabis interacted with our bodies, we ended up discovering this innate and complex homeostatic regulating system. Our endocannabinoid system is constantly adapting and reacting to our environment, which keeps us in balance. Our bodies are constantly undergoing biochemical and physiological adjustments to maintain this state. A really good example of this is when we encounter stress. So there are physiological responses we experience when we experience stress: pain, anxiety, discomfort. And so cannabis is a really excellent tool to work within this system. Let's see. Next slide. The endocannabinoid system is distributed throughout our body. As we could tell that the CB1 receptor is primarily found in the brain, CB2 is distributed throughout the body, and so endocannabinoids are tightly controlled. They're produced when needed and degraded very quickly. They're not meant to be in the body for long periods of time because we can produce them very quickly. And so this has a huge role within supporting our natural systems, whether that's neurological, cardiovascular, immune system, all the systems. The endocannabinoids really help to support this. And so this has a great role in addressing, our health complaints, inflammation, anxiety, all the things that we're encountering in our modern age. And so it's important to also differentiate between phytocannabinoid and endocannabinoid. And what I mean by that is we hear a lot of cannabinoid. What are they actually saying? So phytocannabinoid refers to plant-derived. Endocannabinoid originates within us. So phytocannabinoids, they're naturally occurring within the cannabis plant, notably from the cannabis flowers due to the trichomes that are produced on them. So they exist in their acidic forms. These are the precursors of the active forms that we know very well, CBD and THC. So in the plants, they're in their acid forms. How they get converted to their active form is through a process called decarboxylation. And that just simply means you're removing a carboxyl group through a process of heat, oxygen, and light. there are so many different phytocannabinoids found within cannabis. We just know of a few very well. Obviously, the THC and now CBD is getting a lot of the buzz. There are over 100 different phytocannabinoids present. And that's just so fascinating to me. Here's this plant that has such complex chemistry, and we're just really diving into a very small part still. They provide the plant with protection. So that could be UV damage from the radiation, as well as pest pressure. And so what's interesting here is that phytocannabinoids closely resemble our own endocannabinoids. And these just mean our endocannabinoids, they're these compounds which are derived from arachidonic acid, which are fatty acids. Endocannabinoids are a major component of our endocannabinoid system. Again, these are produced by enzymes that are tightly controlled, and there are enzymes that degrade them just as quickly. And so it's interesting, from the previous slide, there was the two neurons. There was the presynaptic and postsynaptic neuron. And so endocannabinoids function in a retrograde fashion, meaning they travel backwards to either for the presynaptic neuron. So they are able to either inhibit or excite other responses that are needed when we, stress, anxiety, other inflammatory responses that we may experience. And so this is allowing us to modulate various receptors throughout the body as a way of maintaining this balance, the homeostasis. And again, this is as a result of responding to our environment. And so the big topic for today, what is cannabidiol? We know that it's a 21-carbon terpenophenolic compound. It's one of the major phytocannabinoids found within cannabis, again, through those glandular trichomes. It's interesting for hemp, that is the major phytocannabinoid, not the THC, it's CBD. However, CBD is going to be present in high THC strains as well. But for the case of hemp, the industrial part of cannabis sativa, that's the main constituent there, again, with other minor cannabinoids as well. And so scientists have found that CBD is a very versatile compound in addressing many, many bodily complaints. That's why we're able to see such a prolific array of products helping all folks of life. Children with severe epilepsy, our older folks that are experiencing inflammation, and everyone in between that is experiencing anxiety, pain, insomnia, the list goes on. And so we have found that cannabidiol is actually neuroprotective, it's antioxidant, it's anti-anxiety, that's well known, as well as anti-inflammatory. So this is a relatively safe substance and well tolerated. How does CBD work in the body? Well, researchers are still trying to figure this out. A lot of the focus has been primarily been on THC, but as we're shifting kind of away from that, looking at examining other cannabinoids, we're really now diving into this CBD research. So CBD has been found to work on different pathways of our endocannabinoid system. So these consist of the receptors, enzymes, endocannabinoids. So it's interesting that CBD has an indirect kind of influence on our endocannabinoid system, which means, it can function or it interacts with different parts. And so it's not just our cannabinoid receptors, it's other receptors as well, other enzymes, transporters, things like that. CBD has been found to inhibit endocannabinoid reuptake, which just means it's able to keep anandamide, remember that main endocannabinoid, it's helpful to have CBD in there as it helps to keep anandamide in the system a little bit longer. People who are experiencing different illnesses in their life or for whatever reason, they may not have as much anandamide in their system, which could be a result of poor diet, stress, insomnia, all really important things that can impact our system quite severely. And so we may need CBD to really help keep that inner system longer. Again, anandamide refers to that bliss molecule. And so CBD has also been found to activate other receptors, such as the TRPV1 receptor, which is very interesting. So again, this demonstrates the more indirect influence. It's theorized that CBD isn't intoxicating because it's not fully able to activate the neuroreceptor CB1. And what that means is that CBD will bind to the CB1 receptor on the allosteric site, which just means other. THC and anandamide will bind to the orthosteric, the main site on the receptor, but CBD will bind to the allosteric site, which will change how THC or anandamide will bind. It changes their ability to do that, which has been found to help blunt THC's psychoactive effects. A lot of people don't necessarily want to feel that, or the euphorogenic properties that THC offers. So it's a way to help blunt that intoxication, other unwanted side effects from THC. So it continues to be researched, CBD continues to be researched and studied to understand how it works with our main receptors of our endocannabinoid system, but also through other molecular pathways. And so that is all good things that are happening. So as we continue to experience the cultural shift of accepting cannabis and cannabis products, as well as the regulations loosening, we will continue to discover more of what this plant has to offer in terms of supporting our health and wellness. And I have the great pleasure of introducing my colleague, Nate, who is going to take it away about CBD formulation.
Hey, thanks, Jill. Also, thanks to Aaron and Dr. DiCarlo. I am super excited to be here. Excited to talk a little bit about formulating with CBD, how we do it at Factory6. What are some of the things to look out for? What are some of the things that we've learned from it? First off, I wanted to talk a little bit about Factory6, who we are, what we've done, and one of the big differences that people see right now, or one of the big questions that people have, is what is the difference between marijuana and hemp? And ultimately, what that is oh, hey, that's a nice picture of me. Sorry, I'm going to skip to one more. Hemp versus marijuana, right? I want to talk a little bit about that because ultimately there's not a big difference aside from what we have as a people, if you will. Specifically, the U.S. government kind of like led this charge early last century, separated the difference between hemp and marijuana because of the amount of THC in that. And so Jill was talking a little bit about the CBD levels in cannabis sativa, in hemp, and what we have found, and it's not completely across the board like this, but as THC levels rise, CBD levels go down, and the inverse effect, as CBD levels go up, THC levels often come down. They're not directly proportionate, but they're pretty close like that. There are a bunch of other cannabinoids, as Jill was talking about. THC and CBD are the primary cannabinoids that are in there. But without really digging into the details of strain specifics, most of the time when you're looking at a marijuana plant or a THC plant, it's difficult to tell which is hemp, which is marijuana, because they are very, very similar plants. Now, with any other agricultural product out there, you'll see differences from strain to strain and plant to plant, and even from acreage to acreage, depending on how it's grown, how it's being watered and fertilized and whatnot. And so, like Dr. DiCarlo said earlier, there are quite a few strains of hemp that are grown for fiber. And those are very easy to spot because typically they're like 6 or 7 feet tall. They don't have a lot of the flowers that you see in typical marijuana and hemp, where the trichomes are at, which Jill talked about those trichomes. That's where the majority of the CBD and the THC is found. And so the focus on those plants, on the hemp plants, is all about growing tall and getting a lot of fiber. Whereas if you're growing a plant for the CBD or THC, you're going to have a shorter plant, and you want most of the plant's efforts to go into growing the flower, as it's commonly called. So looking at this plant, it would be difficult for even somebody that knew whether it was hemp or marijuana. It'd be difficult for somebody that's even a professional to tell the difference between these. They are very similar plants. There are two strains of cannabis. There's indica and sativa, and indica is typically a marijuana strain of plant, and sativa is typically a marijuana and or CBD strain of plant. And the big difference in them is very little. It's just the amount of THC. So by definition, just getting to the very definition of what this is, hemp versus marijuana is a term that's classified typically by government regulation of a plant that has 0.3% THC or more is marijuana, 0.3% or less is hemp. And that's by strain, and it's by the weight at the plant level. So it's one of those things that it can get pretty complicated. Early on when we were getting into CBD and we're trying to look into how everything worked and what was going on in there, what we saw was people trying to explain that there's like male versus female versions of the plant or whatnot. And ultimately it comes down to they're the same plant, and they're just different varieties and different strains, kind of like apples. I grew up on an apple farm, and we had red apples and green apples and yellow golden apples, and they'll have a little bit different flavors and different size fruit, and you can get a lot different things out of the same apple, or out of what you call an apple, but there are different strains of that. So looking again at this picture, like you wouldn't be able to tell if that's a marijuana strain or a hemp strain. So now, when we're talking about formulating with CBD, this is where the key part comes into it. It is legal in the U.S., and we'll deal specifically with the U.S. We're not going to talk too much about Canada or other parts of the world, even though they are most countries are following a similar platform for this. But it is legal to formulate with hemp-derived CBD right now, and to sell that to consumers, as long as it has 0.3% THC or less in the finished product, and it comes from a plant that started with 0.3% THC or less. So when we're talking about formulating with CBD, we're talking about using any CBD that is derived from hemp strains, and that's kind of where we got into to formulating at Factory6. Kind of moving on from the difference between the CBD and THC, and getting into the different types of CBD products. Factory6, we are a CBD manufacturing company. We do white label products, custom manufacturing, all specifically related to cannabis derived products, specifically CBD, even though there are other cannabinoids that are starting to take more note. CBN, CBG specifically, those are two that are becoming very popular. So at Factory6, we started as a company about 3 years ago, and really started delving into CBD products not long after we started. We were very fortunate because of the timing of what happened with the 2018 Farm Bill that Dr. DiCarlo had mentioned. We, as a company, decided that we were going to be very specific towards CBD products early 2018, and by the end of 2018, when the U.S. Farm Bill, the 2018 Farm Bill passed, we had already hit a little bit of a stride in what we were doing, and how we were going about that. Looking at what some of the things that we do, and some of the things that other people do to make popular CBD products. The primary is edible or infused as of right now, and tinctures. So kind of that first one, and then the middle on this chart. Tinctures, in my opinion, aren't the most effective as a product that is. It's not an easy to use product. It's not easy to take around with you in your purse. It's not fun to like take a dropper of it and put it in your mouth. It's not the most effective product that way. But as a carryover from the marijuana industry, where people were using tinctures to build their own, making their own tinctures for THC. Mostly it was in regards to people were using them for cancer applications. That it's kind of a carryover. So people just assume that you need a tincture for it to work. But edibles is probably where the fastest growing market is right now. People are putting them in drinks, they're putting them in gummies and candies and powdered drink mixes or ready to drink mixes. And they are incredibly effective. As Jill was talking about earlier, when you put CBD into a product and you consume it, it's used by your endocannabinoid system. You take those phytocannabinoids and your body is able to use those in your endocannabinoid system. And whatever route that you take in your cannabis delivery method, in the CBD product type, you have different reactions to it. Edibles and infused take a little bit longer typically. They go through the digestive system. You know, the patch, if you put a patch on, it'll absorb in through your dermis, and it works on a little bit different level. Some of the fastest ways is through smoking a joint, using a vape pen. That is typically the fastest because as it goes through the lungs, it hits. Most people will feel an effect in a matter of minutes. Tinctures take a little bit longer because they are similar to edibles. They have to go through your digestive system. Salves and creams work like the patches, and we are seeing an absolute just a huge increase in people using salves and creams because the effectiveness of targeting muscle aches and pains through those salves and creams. Applicators are a fairly lower priority, but there's some pretty cool things that you can do with them. Not priority, sorry, just the popularity. Apologize for that. But yeah, there's some fun ways that people are building CBD products, and we're really excited for stuff that's not on this list. As of right now, these are kind of the popular ones, kind of popular delivery methods, but we are seeing all sorts of innovative products that are coming to market. And one of the things that we're not showing on here yet that is in the last, I would say less than the last year, so maybe even the last 6 months or so, is the terpenes that are being used separate from the cannabinoids from CBD or from industrial hemp that are being used in smells, as well as used for ingestion, whether it's in edibles or tinctures or even on creams. There is a ton of anecdotal evidence to support that the terpenes that are present in the cannabis plant are incredibly effective along with the cannabinoids to the end product. So as you see products that have different types of CBDs in them, or different types of cannabinoids in them, the use of terpenes is showing a lot of promise to add to those. So, all right, I feel like I jumped over something though. No, I think we're good to keep going. All right, so as a good segue, as I was talking about terpenes in cannabis products, there are a handful of different terpenes that are tracked and that as you purchase CBD products, as you purchase, whether it's the raw material, CBD material, whether it's a crude material, which is just when it's first come off of the plant, the first version of the extract, whether it's a distillate version where you have extracted you've distilled some of the CBD and THC out, looking for a higher percentage of that, or an isolate where you're only looking at a very specific cannabinoid, CBD or CBG or CBN. Terpenes play a huge role in crude and distillates, and they're becoming more and more popular and more studied. We're not going to talk too much about the direct effects of them, but I want to point out a handful of things in here. If you look at some of this is a actual terpene profile from one of the things that one of our products. The most prevalent terpenes are typically, you see them right here, beta caryophyllene, the humulene, then myrcene and pinene. Those are probably the top two that are in hemp derived CBD products. And alone, these terpenes, and because we're talking to a group of most of you on this presentation are probably directly related to the essential oil side of the business, of business and whatnot. Alone, these terpenes are effective and oftentimes not the best smelling. One of the things that we've found, and one of the difficulties in working with hemp-derived CBD, is these terpenes are very light compounds, right, compared to CBD and THC and the other cannabinoids. And so as you go through and you extract them, whether you're using an ethanol or alcohol extraction, or whether you're using a critical or supercritical CO2 extraction, or there are a handful of new water extractions that are coming out that are very effective. But as you extract these from the plant, you lose a lot of those terpenes. You see a lot of the terpenes when the plant is dried before it's extracted. You lose a lot of that right off the bat. And then as the alcohol or the CO2 the extraction process happens, these terpenes are beat up, for lack of a more scientific term. They get beat up and they actually degrade slowly. And so what happens is that nice, typically sweet and the odors that fresh cannabis has don't always translate into the crude or distilled portions of CBD extracts. So you have to be careful. And this is one of the things that when you're formulating for an ingestible product or a product that is going to be that people are going to taste in some way, shape, or form, even if it's a vape pen, as the terpenes are being beat up during the extraction process, they can change, and they have a very distinct smell. And not to be too crude, but to me, they smell like cat pee. They smell like really gross cat pee, and they can degrade in different forms. And it doesn't always have that same smell, but they do degrade over, through that extraction process, and you lose some of the benefits as well to that. So if you're formulating for something ingestible, just be aware of that. Whether that means that you need to have what you would look at as a second pass through a distillation process to remove some of those lower terpenes, or whether you need to play around and maybe even go to some isolated versions of those cannabinoids, so that you can get the effect of the cannabinoids, knowing that you're going to lose some of the terpenes is important. All right, so I jumped through really quick in this, and let's bring this back to here. I don't know if Jill or Dr. DiCarlo actually, I think we'll turn the time back over to Jill to talk a little bit about the, never mind. I'm jumping back and forth. I apologize, guys. Jill already talked about the endocannabinoid system. So with this, one of the things that we want to talk about is specifically for types of CBD products. What are some of the forms and what are the types of endocannabinoid, or sorry, it was some of the cannabinoids to use in this. So let me go back a couple of slides, and I want to bring up the slide with these different cannabis delivery methods, and specifically for those of you that are on the webinar to know how to formulate with them, talking a little bit about what are the beneficial, what are the benefits to different types of products to use. So from an edible and a side of things, there are quite a few people that enjoy the hempy cannabis flavor that you get with terpenes in edibles and in infused products. And there are quite a few people, especially in the main, in mass market, that don't like that hemp flavor and hemp smell. So when you're building an edible or an infused product that's going to be ingested and you want to make it a little bit more palatable to the general public, we recommend using a higher potency distillate, or a higher potency, even an isolate in these products, so that because mass market isn't, as of yet, they're typically not fans of the hempy cannabis smell. They like knowing that it's there in the background, but they don't like a very strong, potent cannabis taste and smell. It's kind of the opposite when you know, I'm going to skip over patches because they don't have smell, taste, or there's not a lot of that to it. But it's kind of the opposite when you get to joints or vape pens. Joints obviously are very specific to the hemp strain. You take your hemp flower or cannabis flower, grind it up and put it in a joint, and based off of the strain that it is, it's going to have its own smell. But vape pens, what we find are people are taking distillate from hemp, CBD distillate, anywhere between 60% to 80% CBD, and they're reintroducing terpenes into the vape pen for that hemp smell and hemp flavor. So if you're formulating for something that's going to be vaped, oftentimes you'll have people will appreciate reintroducing terpenes into that, and that can be in addition to flavors. Especially here in the U.S., vape flavors are very fruity and fun, but having a little bit of reintroduction of terpenes into that can be good for mass market. With tinctures, we see two camps. We see a very like, hey, I don't want any smell cannabis flavor, or I want a very hempy smell and taste. And it kind of depends on the market that you're going into. So being aware of who the market that your product is going to be going into, you can go anywhere from using an isolate that is going to have very little to, if any, hemp flavor and smell, to the opposite side of using a crude extract that will have even, you know, a lot of the terpenes, even still some of the chlorophyll that also has a bite to it, and there's a lot of flavor that you get with that. And that's it's kind of an either or. It's not very much of a middle of the road with tinctures. But one of the things that we found at Factory6 is it's very easy to introduce flavors and a little bit of sweetness, whether it's from stevia or monk fruit, or even some of our customers request a sucralose to be added to an oil-based tincture that would allow, or that makes it more mass market friendly. So whether you're introducing an essential oil flavor like a peppermint or spearmint with a little bit of sweetness, Spearmint and sweetness is a great way to, and it accents the cannabis flavors quite well. Or if you're introducing maybe a berry flavor, mixed berries is popular across the board. Creams, but what we found is if you add citrus, typically citruses, they enhance the flavors and the terpenes found in cannabis. So if you want to avoid that, if you're going for a more mass market product that doesn't have a lot of that, you would try to avoid citrus. So whether it's an orange or a lemon essential oil, you'd want to stay away from that in those. So, all right. Well, I think with that, I probably want to take a second and slide a little bit back and see if there are any specific questions. I'll say if Dr. DiCarlo and Jill can jump back in and see if I missed anything that we need to talk to.
Oh, that was great. I think what we can do now is open it up for questions and discussion. I really appreciated how you laid out these different delivery methods. I myself didn't even realize how many different forms CBD is starting to go into. And really what we talked about, Nate, before we came on, was it's really becoming a part of the flavor and fragrance marketplace as it's now entering more and more mainstream products. I was contacted by a group that want to put CBD into perfumes so that when people are spraying themselves with the fragrance, they're also putting CBD on dermally. And I thought that was so interesting. And they're also wrestling with how to control the smell of the hemp and not have it overpower the fragrance. So it's a really, like you said, the innovation of how it's being used, what it's going into is rapidly expanding.
Dr. Charler, you are absolutely correct. A year ago, no one was talking about using terpenes and smells in that way. And in the past 6 months, we've seen a huge growth in that specifically. And one of the things that you're seeing across the board, not just not just for the not trying to be direct, but herbal gerbils or the health food stores, but very much more mass market, is a focus on oil-based smells. And you're seeing a lot of oil-based fragrances coming to market more and more, as opposed to the alcohol-based. And it formulates very well with CBD and the cannabis-derived terpenes that you can add to that. It's very, very popular right now. It's becoming very popular.
Yeah, so by next year, who knows?
Absolutely, yeah.
So is Factory6, sorry, Jill, go ahead. Okay. Do you want to add to that?
I just wanted to answer someone's question on the chat. They were discussing or asking the soil and topography for hemp production. How you grow it impacts the quality. So if you're on poor soil, not ideal locations for growing because it has deep roots. If the plant has to struggle to establish a complex and healthy root system, it's going to be really challenged. And so the better the soil, the better the location, the better the final product you are going to have. So yes, you can grow it anywhere. However, that's going to impact the final quality.
Yeah. And it is unique as a plant in that way that humanity has brought it all over the planet and grown it in different ecosystems. I mean, from the steppes of Mongolia to Colombia to Israel to the United States to Canada. And of course, there's different limitations, as you're saying, Jill, in those different places. But it is an incredibly adaptable and flexible plant. I think that's partly where it gets its slang name of weed, because it really is a robust plant. But to get it to flower and to get the complex chemistry and the terpenes, you do want to baby it. It needs good soils, like you're saying, deep soils, good compost, and good organic fertilizers. We don't want to see synthetic fertilizers used. But like fish emulsion did great for my hemp plants. So, so yeah, the more care, the more soil complexity and rich soils, well drained soils, because it hates its feet wet, doesn't like its roots to be in standing water. The better chemistry, the better complexity you'll get. So I think, did we get the other questions there? Nate, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How old of a company is Factory6?
So as a company, we've been around about 3 years. We started as a branding and marketing company that would produce products specific for whatever the needs of the company was. So we would have people come to us and say, "Hey, I want a protein shake. Can you produce a protein shake for me?" And we'd be able to give them the brand, the look, all the supporting material for it, and the finished product. And in late 2017, we started seeing a lot of the CBD coming to market. And we knew there was going to be a rush for the legalized version of CBD. And so we did pivot at that time. It was very, you probably see it in other markets, but with CBD specifically, what we found early 2018, when we were sourcing CBD material, when we were trying to find where do we buy crude or distillate or isolate from, how do we acquire it, it was very gray market. And what I mean by that is some of the first, the first kilo or the first liters of CBD that we bought, we drove from here where we're at in Utah. We drove over to Denver because we couldn't ship it. We drove to Denver, and it was kind of like a cash deal in a Wendy's parking lot. And it was sketchy. And where we are now, it's very legalized. The state of Utah is very open to it. Like Aaron said earlier, the state of Utah is very pro hemp, and APRC is taking a very front stand, and they're being very active in that standpoint. But we've been able to bring a lot of credibility to the CBD and hemp market that was not there before.
Yeah, and it's medically legal now in the state of Utah,
yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and hemp is legal federally
Yes.
for growing it everywhere. In fact, APRC has visited hemp producers in Utah, and some of them were really struggling. In fact, some of the small family farms that we visited, at least one of them did get out of the hemp business because they were having a hard time to know who would buy their product and how to get it to market. Yeah. And so we're seeing a lot of readjustments in terms of who will be producing hemp for market and where that will happen. Yeah. And one of the distinguishing factors that I've seen is the companies that are doing really well growing the hemp for CBD and users like yourself, your company, are vertically integrated. And they have the ability within their farm to do everything they need to do to get you what you're looking for, instead of outsourcing that parts of the production. And so I really hope for family farms to have a big stake in this industry, because it really can help our small and family farmers across the United States to add to other crops and other things that they produce. So I do have hopes that will still be there.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think that the vertical integration is important. The other thing that I think we'll see is co-ops starting to pop up where vertical integration is not possible, because it can be not just expensive, but also time consuming. So I think we'll see a lot of co-ops start to adjust to bring that credibility as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So is Factory6 growing?
We're growing pretty quickly. We're having a lot of fun while doing it as well. That chart that you were showing in terms of the growth that's happened since 2019 and then through this year, and how that factors out, and how you see that growth curve kind of, it's almost like hockey stick growth curve that you hear about in business a lot. That is happening right now in the hemp industry. It's funny that one of the biggest things that I think is happening that's holding back growth, I don't think it's COVID that has stymied the growth in 2020, but I think it's the FDA. And what I mean by that is, in 2018 with the Farm Bill, when the Farm Bill came out, Congress said, hey, it's okay, formulate with CBD, you can use it. And the FDA not long after that was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hey, we're the FDA. We get to say who gets to use it and what. And there's been a little bit of a back and forth between Congress and the FDA. And we feel from Factory6, we feel that the cows are already out of the barn. Like, people are formulating with it. It's legal to formulate it with topicals right now. It's completely legal, and people are using it in ingestibles quite a bit, even though the FDA has not come out and outright said you can or you cannot. They've taken a step back. And what happened is in February of this year, in February of 2020, they made an announcement of, hey, we're not making an announcement yet, but just so you know, this is what we said last year. And everybody that was getting ready to run with it had kind of like their brakes, they kind of pumped their brakes just a little bit of like, all right, hey, well, the FDA hasn't made an announcement. And that hit about the same time as COVID. And so a lot of people, what we would see as COVID slowdown, I think is actually is more directly related to the FDA's not making a decision on where to go with it.
And this is, the FDA has refrained from making this position is because they've approved a pharmaceutical called Epidiolex. And their stance is you cannot have CBD in food products when it's already a pharmaceutical. So there's a lot of that resistance because there's that market
conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have time for one more question, and we have one from Juan as asking, Nate, which is the most preferable and economic extraction method?
Ooh, that is a great question. Preferable, that is, I would say, a matter of choice. A lot of it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Personally, I prefer a water extraction because it leaves a lot of the cannabis-derived terpenes in there. It doesn't beat them up. It doesn't degrade them the same as CO2 or ethanol. But when you talk about which is more economical, ethanol extraction is the easiest to get into. The cost of the equipment, the cost of the raw material, the cost of ethanol, it's cheaper to get into. But over time, if you're doing large scale runs and you're doing multiple batches throughout the year, if you're continuing to run, CO2 will give you a better payout long term because you're able to reuse most of that CO2, whereas you do lose a fair amount of ethanol over time. So I'm sorry, that's not the most direct answer, but I think it gives you a little bit of info in there, Pawan.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, we certainly have a lot of information about hemp and cannabis on the APRC website. We've produced a straight from the source video series that people can watch there for further information. We send out education packets to APRC clients who do cannabis testing at the lab, and we have people in our team like Jill who write blogs, and we're really at APRC, we want to get out as much information to the public as possible for people to make informed decisions, and also for the people who love essential oils to embrace cannabis as an aromatic species and something in our toolkit of aromatic and medicinal plants that has an application for people who so choose to use it. And so, Nate, thanks so much for being on with us today. We're really happy that you do your cannabis testing at APRC and that you agreed to talk about formulating with CBD and to help us bridge that with the flavor and fragrance industry and the CBD industry to start having these cross the aisle talks about using this more and more in products. So
thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of this beautiful day.